Good afternoon. My name is Francis Todey. I'm with the Iowa DOT. A question as far as what we're doing with performance targets. Specifically in Iowa, I don't think the performance targets are having a direct impact on what we do with preservation. We already were in that conversation of saying we needed to get more surface treatments done. We see a value in them. So we're not going to, I don't think it's going to change what we do significantly. I think what it is doing is generating a really good, deeper conversation of saying, what should we do with the funds we have, and how should we pick projects, and what's the right treatment? We had a director about 18 years ago who really believed that the best surface treatment, best rehab, everything was 1 mill and 3 inches of hot mix, and that solved every problem in the world. So we've been kind of digging ourselves out of that mindset, because a lot of the districts literally were just afraid to do anything differently. So we're seeing the districts using more surface treatments, and we're happy to see that. Our asset management discussion is really based a lot on, programming tended to be interstate, non-interstate. That was the way the funding was split up. Put the interstate over here, the non-interstate over on another side, and then we had the non-interstate, and we just kind of said a road is a road is a road. Now, that's not absolutely true. People would look at saying, okay, here's the US highway, here's a low volume road, but we didn't really try to distinguish between anything as far as when we gave resurfacing money to the districts, okay, you start picking projects. So I think that the whole asset management issue has helped us start a conversation, a better conversation about saying, let's talk about the interstate. Let's talk about the non-interstate NHS. Let's talk about the non-NHS, and talk about what our expectations are on all of those different levels. And maybe we need other stratification with that too, because we can't look at our essentially our low volume roads and say, well, they should be like interstates. We're going to act like they're or like an NHS route. So we need to really rethink that, and I think that's kind of where we are now. What is really driving that is we have had a planning study put out that was looking at Interstate 80 across Iowa and the significant capacity needs that are going to be needed there, and the investment needed in that. In August, we had a planning charrette where we literally broke up the entire interstate system, gave them to different groups, and said, okay, what would you do on your part of the interstate system between now and 2040? Now, think about that. Think of what could happen between now and 2040. Is autonomous vehicles going to change that? Are connected vehicles going to change that? What are all the things that might change our needs? So luckily, what it came down with is trying to put a number on what we think it will need, what we'll need to invest. We'll get into a discussion about not trying to steal from everybody else or all the other roadway system to deal with the interstate. And also we've had a discussion in our asset management technical committee where, I'm not going to knock on planners too much, but one of the planners said, oh, we'll make a plan for 2040 and we'll just implement it. And the district said, wait a minute. You don't just lay out a plan now and not say, we're going to go back and revise and go through an entire iterative process of saying, what do we know now? What's the best solution? What will we know in 5 years from now? Will that be something different? And how do we think through all those things? So we're having that discussion now, but I think everybody's really on board of saying, we're going to go through this iteration of how we spend our money, and that's going to work its way down through the entire system. And It's going to be a challenge because we're going to get to some low volume roads that we were discussing in our group this morning. We're not going to be able to do very much with and say, what can we do to provide a acceptable level of service, and what is acceptable? And I guess the last bullet point is preservation, rehabilitation, capacity is always has always been a big discussion point. One of the things that we're doing with our pavement preservation work is really trying to get into some training with our districts and saying, can we expand the number of treatments? Can we talk about the timing of the treatments? Let's make sure we know what those are and get it out there. Talk about, we're still talking about what do we expect out of life, and which I'll talk tomorrow that our task force I'm on is wrestling with that issue too, of saying, what is the life that we can expect out of certain treatments? And we need to start really showing when we get enough treatments out, enough surface treatments, what impact does that have on our overall system condition? We can use DTIMs to say, we think this is what it's going to be, but we actually have to get enough out there and track it and really know that. One of the things that we're doing in Iowa, talking about what's happening in Iowa, is, and this was kind of nice because it didn't come from the DOT. The counties, we have the Highway Research Board in Iowa that has representatives from the counties, the cities, and the DOT. And the counties are essentially the largest group on there. And they latched on to saying, we want to do preservation treatments. Are they effective? So we put together a research project to say, is it effective in Iowa? Now, the first problem we had is that we were dealing with different databases. We have what Iowa collects on our system. The counties, until about 4 years ago, were not on that system. So counties knew of treatments they had done, but they didn't have data to say what has really happened. So that was the first problem that we ran into. But the good part of it is that through this first phase of the research, we've kind of found out the things we need to do. As I said, we now the DOT is collecting data on every paved road in the state of Iowa. So now if Story County puts a surface treatment on their road, they know when it was done, we should be able to have data we've collected every other year to see what happened to that roadway. So as we go further along in this, we can end up providing better data to the counties and to everyone else who's saying what is happening. And I'll go back to what I first said. The really nice thing about this was the counties were behind it because the county system is over twice as big as the primary highway system. So in my mind, they're the ones that really have the ability to really see great savings if they take care of their system, especially since they tend to have a lower volume system where it really deteriorates from just being from atmospheric conditions, not so much from traffic. Thermal cracks and weathering are really what they see a lot of. So if we can get this information out to them and get them involved, we can see an overall improvement in the system, in a statewide system. One of the things that we are doing, I'm glad Steph brought it up, we are also talking about doing hot in place recycling a couple routes next year. We've been toying with this, and finally one district said, yeah, we'd like to try it. Luckily, they're also going to do a couple different surfaces on it, so we'll see what happens with different surface treatments on it. So we're kind of excited about seeing how well it goes and seeing if it's something that will fit in Iowa. We've used a lot of cold in place, and it has served Iowa very well. So I just want to see how hot in place fits in with that. One of the things that is probably happening in Iowa, a lot of is we've done a few ultra-thin hot mix overlays. I think it has some potential. It's not going to take the place of surface treatments because the counties will say we can't afford to put put that on our roads. We need something cheaper. But we see it as a potential of something that is going on that could provide a good wearing surface. Just made a note, Steph had mentioned the issue with milling and surface treatments. We have done a few of those where we've done milling and done slurry seals on top of them. One of the benefits of coming to this meeting, if you remember hearing Andrea Latham talk about milling and her information on milling and micro milling, and she shows the picture of V'ing out and saying, that's when you're going too fast. We had a district want to do a mill and a slurry seal. Ended up that the milling was rough. The gradation for the slurry seal was on the larger side. It got overlaid before the end of the year, and there's discussion of what went on. I said, well, do you have any pictures? Well, they showed the picture. The first picture I saw with the milling, I said, oh, that's V'ing out. Andrea said they're milling too fast, and especially it was just a matter of saying, you know, if you're going to do an overlay, fine. But if you're going to use it for some type of surface treatment, you want that smooth. So we got into discussion about, do we micro mill? Do we not micro mill? And of course, the industry is saying, no, don't bring micro milling in. So we said, okay, then we're going to have a spec for how fast you can go forward, have a test section, agree to what we want that thing to look like, and we're going to have to watch that. But that was one of the things that, again, wasn't a bad idea. It's just that the contractor really didn't understand what we wanted, and we didn't have a spec either, and it was a problem. People with me today are Allison Smythe, if you want to raise your hand, Jim Phillips, I'm not sure that Jim has made it here yet, and myself. So thank you. Any questions? The question was, what was the surface on the CIR? We're really using that as a rehabilitation treatment. So we'll cold in place and typically put 3 inches of hot mix on top, because one of the things that we found is a lot of times this is not true of all contractors, some can do a really good job. One of them, we have some that can't put down a smooth CIR surface, so we need 2 lifts just to get ride back, unfortunately. Although I have to admit, there was one who I think that he put down a smoother lift than the hot mix contractor did after he had 2 tries afterwards. We've done that, and mostly because usually we're doing this where we know we're going to lose a little structure with the CIR and we want to add a little structure back. And as I said, this is a rehabilitation treatment where most of what we're trying to do is to delay thermal cracks coming back through or reflective cracking. So I would have trouble calling it a preservation treatment as such. But if it delays cracking coming back for a few years, that's great. The question is, are we really working on this spec? We made a modification. I think it was just a proposal note, I think was what we finally came down to, but generally put a forward speed and a test section saying, let's see what you can get with this, and if we agree that's what we want, then we'll go forward with it and let the contractor know. I'm almost convinced this was a subcontractor that came in, and all he was worried about was production, and saying, how fast do I get to the other end? I just mill it and go. And so again, that's little details. You need to know what you're doing. Thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.